talking about how to start an LLC in Wyoming, and what you can see behind me here is a checklist that we're going to go through that I'm casting from my computer. But before we get to that, I want to talk about something I like to call the LLC dumpster fire. Now, that's when you get your LLC set up, but you're not familiar with terms such as piercing the corporate veil, commingling funds, registered agents, or pass-through taxation. Or perhaps after formation, you don't know how the LLC renewal process works, or you haven't looked into the proper business licenses and permits for your new LLC. So what happens is when people don't do this work, they get the LLC set up, but then it fails in the moment of need, and it can cost them tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees because of it. Now, what we're going to do in the course of this video is we're actually going to zoom out a little bit. So we're going to talk about what an LLC actually does for your business, so we can zoom in and talk about it a little bit further and then get you set up and make sure that you're set up correctly. All right, so first things first, what does it do? Well, the LLC offers limited liability protection, and it also offers pass-through taxation. Let's explain this through an example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC. What we have here is we have a business owner in the center, and maybe this person is a sole proprietorship, all right? So on the left-hand side, they have their personal assets, that's their home, car, and bank account. And on the right-hand side, we have the business assets. We have the physical location, point of sale, business bank account, espresso machine, and lights. Everything is tied back to this business owner, which creates a lot of liability, which we can explain in this next graphic. Now here, owning an LLC that owns a coffee shop looks very different. Now we have the business owner on the left-hand side with their personal assets, and on the right-hand side, we're calling this Acme Coffee LLC. Now here we have all those assets underneath that LLC, but now we have this red line in the middle. This division is something known as the corporate veil. What it does is when you set up that LLC, it divides your business and personal assets. This is really important. Now earlier in the video, you probably remember we talked about something called piercing the corporate veil. To explain this better, we're going to talk about a term called commingling funds. Now, commingling funds is simply when you set up an LLC like this, but you don't get a business bank account set up day one. And then on the left-hand side there, that personal bank account, you run transactions through your personal bank account. This is commingling funds, and it's a huge issue. That's because let's say somebody were to get hurt in your coffee shop and they hire an attorney to sue you. That attorney is going to try to find cracks in the LLC. If they can prove to a judge that you've been commingling funds and a judge agrees, they may grant them permission to pierce the corporate veil. When that happens, this division between your personal and business assets just disappears, and they can come after not only your business assets, but your personal assets as well. So that's why you set up an LLC, but also you need to know things like commingling funds to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So the takeaway here, the tip, is to get a business bank account set up as soon as you get your LLC set up. Next, we're going to go through an explanation of pass-through taxation. Now, we're doing this just because when it gets to tax time, I want you to understand how it's going to work. In this example, we have Acme Coffee LLC. They grossed $140,000 and they had $90,000 of expenses, resulting in $50,000 of net income. The IRS is not taxing Acme Coffee LLC. That $50,000 passes through to your personal tax return. Now, this is also sometimes referred to as flow-through taxation. Same thing, these words are just used interchangeably, but just know that the IRS is going to be taxing you on your personal tax returns. This is actually nice because it's less paperwork, less things you have to do and manage. It's also cheaper than like an S corporation or other things out there that require more maintenance and management. But do know that when you get to that $40,000, $50,000 in net income, in the future, you can apply an S Corp designation to your LLC to save on taxes via dividends. Now, we're not going to talk about that in this video. And the third video in this series, we're going to deep dive on that because I don't want you to be 2 years out and be missing out on tax savings because you didn't know these things. So again, we're going to work through all this together. But what I want to do now is actually go through the checklist of starting your LLC. Now, the first step is to get this checklist for yourself and explore the bonuses and glossary. On the screen right now, you'll see a QR code that you can scan. This checklist is completely free and it's also based in the cloud, so it's going to be continually updated and improved over time. But when you go down to the bottom here, glossary of terms, one of the terms here is certificate of good standing. There's an LLC scam that's pretty common with that. I suggest you watch this 4-minute video embedded in here because that's going to potentially save you a couple $100 because a lot of people fall victim to that scam. In the bonuses section here, this is really cool. There's an AI chatbot. So what you can do with this is you can one-click questions like this, like how do I register an EIN? But the chatbot will come up with a detailed list of all the steps involved with that. You can ask it how to start an LLC in Wyoming. You can actually brainstorm names for your LLC as well. It's a pretty cool tool. There's a free charitable opportunity. There's a $20 donation that can be made on your behalf for charity when you're setting up your LLC. This yearly accounting calendar, really huge. We're going to cover this in the third video as well. We're going to explain all the important dates, and this accounting calendar will be updated every year as well. So just wanted to make you aware of all these extra bonuses available to you. Now, what you need to do is decide which route you want to go. Do you want to go through the state website? Do you want to go through an online legal tool like an LLC service? Or do you want to go through a business attorney? It really depends on your specific situation, and it requires an entire video to deep dive on this because I've seen issues where people like overspend by $1,500 going the wrong direction here. What we're going to do for the sake of this video is just go through the state website and explain the articles of organization so you understand what's going on. And then in the next video, we're going to further educate you so you can figure out which is the right path for your need. What you're going to have to do first is decide on a name for your LLC. The important thing here is the name has to be unique. It can't be already taken within the state. But a lot of times people think they need the perfect name. You don't. Because like, look at Acme Coffee LLC. Terrible name for a coffee shop. But you can do something called a DBA, a doing business as, or sometimes referred to as a fictitious name that you can set up. And that exists underneath the LLC, and that can be your brand name. So it might be something like Espresso Yourself Cafe could be the brand name, and the LLC is just a different name. So don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to have the perfect name here. Search availability of your business name. Well, there's a state directory list here that takes you to the website. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to Wyoming. All right, that one's good. So filing name, I'm going to do contains. Now, there's going to be a lot of LLCs in Wyoming because it's a pretty favorable state to set up an LLC. So people will set it up out of state. I'm just going to put the word coffee in here because we've been working through that example. What you're going to see is it's going to be a lot of different names for coffee, right? So if you were like, I want to have 51 Caffeine LLC, I guess that's different. 406 Coffee Grounds LLC. Those are all taken. What you need to have though is, let's say you did something like this and you did a search. Now what we're going to see is something where it says there's no results found. That is what you're looking for when it comes to your LLC name within the state of Wyoming. I do think even if you use an online legal tool, this is a nice step to take because some of them will like take you through the process and be like, oh, that name's actually taken. You can do this work ahead of time and see if you have a name that is set up for you for the state of Wyoming. Now next is getting your LLC actually set up. First step here, registering your LLC name. I put this on here because this is kind of like buying a domain name and saying you have a website. You don't. You just have a domain name. When you register an LLC name, you just have the reservation for that name, but you don't actually have an LLC set up. To do that, you have to write your articles of organization. You have to sign a registered agent and then file your articles of organization. So why don't we look at this? There's another state directory link here. We open this up and scroll down, we'll go to Wyoming, and then here is a PDF version of the Wyoming Limited Liability Company instructions. So you can read through these instructions, but what I'm going to do is just highlight a few aspects of this. So name of the limited liability company, that's that unique name that you came up with. Number 3 here is really important. Name and physical address of its registered agent. It doesn't do a great job of explaining this, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this one. A registered agent is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. Now, let's say that in that coffee shop example, you're being sued. You're going to get something called a service of process notice, which is basically saying you have to show up in court. The registered agent is going to make sure that you get that documentation and you're showing up to court with all the important information that you need. Now, the rules with the registered agent is that they must have a physical mailing address within the state of Wyoming. It cannot be a P.O. box. On top of that, you have to maintain this registered agent for as long as you have this LLC. So with this process of going through the state, they don't provide you with any information on who to use for your LLC. And especially if you're out of state setting up, you may not have any kind of like contacts within the state to handle this. So what I would recommend is you go through the online legal tools. They will actually partner with registered agent services for you. One in particular actually gives you a registered agent free for the first year. And again, we're going to cover that in the next video in this series. But I just wanted to make you aware of what the registered agent is. Now, number 4, mailing address of the limited liability company. 5 is the principal office address. and then you consent to electronic services, and then your signature, date, print name, contact, and then whammy, you're down to consent to appointment by registered agent. So once you have this set up, it says you're ready to mail in your documents. So here you can see the Secretary of State's address here. And then when you mail this in, it'd be about 15 days typically, but it really depends on the time of year. They have busy seasons with this. So it may take several weeks to get your actual LLC formed, but you will mail this in and also with your filing fee. Now, if you go through the state's website, you can also do all of this online, which is a little bit easier. So a lot of people like doing that. But once you assign that registered agent and you pay the filing fee, you are good to go with setting up your LLC. Now, after LLC formation, one of the things you want to consider is creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. This is a situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, let's say that you did the coffee shop. You have a business partner and you have 9 locations. What happens when that business partner wants out of the business? Something changes in their life. Well, when you have an LLC operating agreement, it spells out who the managers and members are, what are their roles and responsibilities, what happens if somebody needs to exit the business. It's kind of a thing that's just like pointing out all the potential pitfalls. So if you have that document signed and by all the parties mentioned, what will happen is you just point to that and that's what you do. But if you don't, you may get attorneys involved over here. You're going to have a lot of legal battles. It's going to be very expensive, costly, and frustrating. All right. So signing an LLC operating agreement is always a good idea. If you do a Google search, you can find free ones online. The LLC Services have boilerplate templates. If you have a really unique situation or a lot of liability, it's a more complex business, lots of partners, for example, you can go through a business attorney and make sure that that is really dialed in for you. Now, next, set up an EIN. Here's an IRS link. An EIN is an employer identification number. It's like a social security number for your business. Now, it helps the IRS identify your business, and you can do this for free on this website right here through the IRS. But what you need to know is if you are going to have employees in your business and you're paying them on payroll, you have to have an EIN number. Also, when you apply for things like a business loan or an office space, it looks way more professional if you have that EIN number set up. So just take the steps, get it set up. If you go through the online legal tools, a lot of them will do this for you in a mid-tier package. Most of those tools actually have a $0 plus state fee package now. So if you need to go through that package, a lot of times you can just upgrade and they'll include the EIN as well. Last step here, obtain business licenses and permits for your LLC. Well, the easiest way to explain this is like, let's say you're starting a brewery. Well, you're brewing beer, you're distributing beer, and you're also serving beer on premise. Those 3 things can require different licenses and permits, and they can happen on the federal level, the state level, and the local level. Now, for the local level, what you do is where the business is located, you would call your town hall and say, hey, I'm starting this type of business. What types of licenses and permits do I need? Next, you can also look on the state level. What kind of licenses and permits do you need in the state? You can simply Google, just put in like your state plus business licenses and permits. And then also on the federal level, you can do the same thing as well. I just wanted to make you aware of that because sometimes like if you're starting like you're a chiropractor, a dentist, you're starting a construction company. These are things that require licenses and permits within your ordinances and making sure you're abiding by the local laws. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to deep dive on which path is the right path for your needs. Because as I mentioned before, there's options out there for you to get a free registered agent service for the first year. But what I found is sometimes people overpay by close to $1,500. So what we have here is an embedded cost calculator. And what this is going to do is you can select your state and it'll show you down to the dollar how much it costs to not only set up your LLC, but maintain it for 5 years. I want you to understand what those costs are going to be. We're going to get into these star rating systems right here. We're also going to talk about this. This is really important, especially if you're setting up an LLC out of state. You have to understand domestic versus foreign LLCs. And then lastly, we're going to go through different questions worth asking yourself when it comes to formation on which process is the right path for you. Because if you have, say, LLC for rental properties, you may want to go through an attorney to set that up because there's something called a series LLC. So we're just going to go through a lot of different situations and scenarios there. So again, what I'd recommend is getting this checklist for yourself so you can follow along. There'll be a link in the description below. And in this next video, we're going to deep dive on the right path for your needs and making sure that you're not overspending when you're getting your LLC set up. All right, we'll catch you in the next video.